Hi everyone, my name is John. Welcome back to my channel. It's been a while since I have done a standalone book review. It used to be what this channel was all about once upon a time, a long time ago. But I wanted to let everyone know I am still reading. In fact, I read a few books for the first quarter of Historathon and already talked about SPQR, reviewed it on my channel, and I wanted to talk about another book that I finished, a few weeks ago, right as quarter one was finishing up. And as if you couldn't already tell by the title of the video, it is a book by Anthony Everitt, and it is his biography of Cicero. Cicero, the life and times of Rome's greatest politician. Seems to kind of be a perennial favorite and will probably remain a perennial favorite for quarter one as Historathon goes on into the future. And I hope it does, because if anyone decides to pick it up in the upcoming years, it is a good choice. And I just wanted to tell you why. There is this old saying, it's kind of part apparently Chinese curse. I looked at the origins of the phrase, and also kind of a hopeful wish that goes, may you live in interesting times. And it's usually said in the sort of aspirational hope that someone will live in a time of fruitful change. And it could be that no one took that advice more to heart than orator, politician, philosopher, and lawyer Cicero, who lived from 106 to 43 BC. Anthony Everitt's biography of Cicero takes Cicero's life as a focal point, as you would expect with any biography, but uses his story as a kind of opportunity to, a launching pad to paint a broader picture of the gradual fall of the late Republic that happened leading up to Cicero's death at the hands of Mark Antony's henchmen. Spoiler alert, Cicero dies at the end, in case you didn't know. In what's overall a really strong book, I thought the opening chapters dealing with Cicero's childhood and early adulthood are the weakest part, which has nothing to do with Everitt's writing style, but they almost have to be the weakest because we don't really have a lot of documentation about this part of Cicero's life. Instead, he uses the first, maybe 60, 80 pages, 100 pages of the book to speculate about the kind of life Cicero almost certainly led. But he does it more based on characteristics, socioeconomic class that we know he came from. He wasn't born into an aristocratic family in Rome. He's from sort of a suburb of Rome called Arpinum. And he talks about him in sort of very broad, in this early part of the book, in very broad terms about his family and family life, the nature of what his early education may have been like, etc. And does so via more talking about general cultural trends in Rome. But once Cicero starts to climb the rungs on the cursus honorum, the ladder that all Roman men, and yes, they were all men, had to climb in order to enter elite Roman life, this section starts to sort of ramp up and get more interesting. And that really starts with his tamping down of the Catiline conspiracy in 63 BC, which is kind of when his career really takes off. Everitt's evenhandedness is something I liked about the book. He loves Cicero dearly. He obviously admires him very, very much, but also abstains from any kind of hagiography. And I like that. He never shrinks away at showing Cicero's sometimes lead-footed politicking with the first triumvirate, as he frantically calculates with whom he should curry favor. But despite being a blowhard who always self-servingly wrote to cultivate his own literary reputation, And it's very obvious to not draw the reputation that Cicero was a bit of a blowhard sometimes. It's hard to walk away from Everitt's consideration of him not liking him a little bit more for all of his pomposity, his foibles, and his other shortcomings. Something I wanted more of were more details about the court speeches, their background, why he took up the cases that he did, and how he defended his clients with the rhetoric that he used. Some of what makes Cicero the most interesting, one of the most interesting people in the ancient Roman world, is the way that he built a model of oratory that became its own adjective. We still say Ciceronian oratory, and a picture sort of comes into our head about the kind of language that's being used. These court cases are mentioned in passing, but Everitt glosses over even the most famous ones, maybe dedicates a few pages to them, probably for fear of slowing down the narrative for people who came to read about the greater picture of the decline of the Roman public. But more extensive discussion about the court cases, including in Wareham, which played a large part in launching his career, would have been more welcome for me, at least. Any biography of Cicero will lean necessarily into the hundreds of letters that he wrote to his lifelong friend Atticus, which showed a marked divergence from his carefully crafted, affected oratorical style. And in these letters to Atticus and his other friends, you see him at his most human and his most vulnerable, as when, for example, he learns about the death of his daughter Tullia, possibly the person that he loved most in the world after himself, and also about the various political triangulations as he was trying to determine whether he should curry favor with Crassus or Pompey or Caesar, as they were all vying for power. The letters show him at his most poignantly human, and they still make for some excellent reading, even 20 centuries after his death. And I wanted to add a little bit of a personal note here. I did some reading for a major paper I wrote back in undergraduate school about Cicero, and learned a little bit of the biographical background. But reading this was really like reacquainting myself with an old friend. I wrote, like I said, my undergraduate research thesis on the Tusculan Disputations, which Cicero wrote around the year 45 BC, just a couple of years before he died. And also as he was coming to this very slow realization that the old republic, which he had defended for so long and so vigorously, was almost certainly going to disappear. Cicero is, take it from someone who has read somewhat widely in his writing, he's usually a pretty limp philosopher. He's not a compelling thinker on the page. But the Tusculan Disputations contained some of his best thinking, as they were composed in a set of political circumstances which can bring some much needed acuity, as you might be able to understand. The Tusculan Disputations were my introduction to Cicero, who comes across as a sober, inward thinker throughout them. And Everitt's biography fully fleshed him out in a way that finally made him, at least to me, human, all too human, to riff off the title of another philosopher, much later philosopher, but in a way that helped me even more closely appreciate the Tusculan Disputations, which I think he dedicated to Brutus, if I'm not mistaken. Or was it Atticus? I'm forgetting. but he dedicated them to someone. And Everitt mentions that in the book too. It's probably the best popular biography Cicero could ever hope to have, especially if you're looking for a take that simultaneously introduces you to the Roman politics of the 1st century BC, as most readers of a popular biography of Cicero are probably going to want. So while you might come away with more having done a little bit of quick and dirty previous reading about this time in Roman history, Everitt kind of sets the groundwork for the reader in the first third of the book, where he uses Cicero kind of as a cipher to discuss Roman life more generally, and then sets you up to discuss a bigger picture and see a bigger picture of the downfall of the Roman Republic, which happens right as Cicero is assassinated. So the big takeaway here is about living a public life in the eye of the public in a time of revolution. Just a casual observation. In the decade from 53 to 43 BC, 4 of the most prominent figures of the late Roman Republic fell one by one. First Crassus, and then Pompey, and then Caesar, and then Cicero. 3 were assassinated. 3 were assassinated while Crassus died out east fighting the Parthians. So may you too live in interesting times. May everyone live in interesting times. Just maybe not as interesting as Cicero's. Get yourself killed out there. Anthony Everitt's Cicero, the life and times of Rome's greatest politician, and sometimes great philosopher.